So here's the thing about endings. They're the only part of the story you can't take back. Everything else, rough draft. But that final beat, that's permanent. And somewhere in Atlanta right now, two guys who spent a decade building a monster hit are staring at 30 minutes of footage that has to justify everything that came before it. No pressure. Stranger Things is ending, not theoretically, not eventually, but actually ending after 10 years and enough cultural impact to resurrect Kate Bush's entire discography. The Duffer Brothers are finally pulling the plug on Hawkins, Indiana, and they seem approximately as ready for this as the rest of us, which is to say not at all. Here's what's wild about finale culture in the streaming era. We've watched Game of Thrones immolate its own legacy in real time. We've seen Lost turn into a philosophical cottage industry. The finale has become this impossible cultural litmus test where a single misstep can retroactively poison years of goodwill. And the Duffer Brothers know this. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Stranger Things stopped being the Duffer Brothers show somewhere around the time it became a Halloween costume, a TikTok sound, a Spotify algorithm game changer. It became communal property, and now they have to take it back for just long enough to kill it. That's a weird kind of creative violence. Matt and Ross Duffer spent their 20s making a horror movie that went straight to video on demand in quality so poor you literally cannot watch it in high definition. When they talk about Stranger Things as a second chance, they're not being humble. This was their Hail Mary, and then it connected. Violently, the Duffers went from underdogs to industry titans in the span of a summer. So how do you write an ending when the stakes are that high? Apparently you start with the last 30 minutes and work backwards. This is not how television writing typically works. But the Duffers knew that building forward was a trap. They'd seen too many shows flame out in their final hours, so they did something kind of brilliant and possibly insane. They spent weeks in the writer's room doing nothing but working on the final half hour, refining it, stress testing it, making sure that when the moment came, they'd know exactly what they were aiming for. But here's what gets me. Even with all that preparation, they still can't talk about it without getting emotional. Ross Duffer literally said it makes him sad. That it's easier not to think about the show actually ending. That's not a creator talking about a product. That's someone talking about a part of their life that's about to become past tense. Let's talk about the weirdness of being a Halloween costume. The core cast started filming when they were children, literal children. Finn Wolfhard was 12, Noah Schnapp was 11. They are now in their 20s. They have spent more than half their lives playing these characters. They have aged in public and character in a way that's become this bizarre cultural document of what it means to grow up under algorithmic surveillance. And here's the thing that's kind of heartbreaking. They process this by treating each other like family. When you're 13 and suddenly famous and your face is on lunch boxes, the only people who understand are the other kids going through it with you. They filmed the final day all together. Everyone, including people who had technically wrapped days earlier but stuck around because the idea of not being there for the end was unthinkable. When something takes up a decade of your life, ending it isn't just a career transition, it's a kind of death. They grew up inside this thing. Their adolescence is archived in 4K. That's a strange kind of grief. So the Duffers needed to replace their evil government scientist character, and they thought, who's the most intimidating person we could possibly get? The answer, the woman who taught a generation that action heroines don't need to be sexy to be iconic. They just need to be able to reload a shotgun while sprinting. Linda Hamilton is 68 years old and still doing her own stunts, or at least half of them. She joined Stranger Things fresh off telling her agent she was thinking about retiring, and then her agent said, Stranger Things wants you for a year, and she said yes immediately, because apparently even action legends are susceptible to FOMO. But here's what's actually interesting about Hamilton's casting. It reveals what Stranger Things has always really been about. It's not actually about the 80s. It's about a relationship to the 80s. Hamilton isn't just playing a character. She's playing a walking piece of cultural iconography. She is the 80s, and she kind of hates the 80s. She's gone on record saying she tells young actresses never to go on film in the 80s because the hair and makeup were a crime against humanity. She's playing nostalgia for a time period she's actively critical of. That's some high-level meta-casting. In 2022, a song from 1985 became a #1 hit because a TV show used it in a scene involving a teenager escaping a murder demon. This is the kind of sentence that would have sounded like science fiction a decade ago, but now it's just how pop culture works. Running up that hill, becoming a viral phenomenon, wasn't in anyone's business plan. It just happened because the internet has turned nostalgia into a renewable resource. And Kate Bush seemed delighted by the whole thing. She sent the Duffers a gift, a gilded birdcage with animatronic birds that chirp when you wind them up. Let's take a moment to appreciate how perfectly on brand that is. Not flowers, not champagne. A mechanical bird situation because Kate Bush is committed to the bit in a way that most artists never achieve. But here's what's actually fascinating. This demonstrates how fandom culture has completely restructured the music industry. A song can be dormant for 40 years and then suddenly become ubiquitous because it's soundtracked the right emotional moment. The algorithm has created this weird circular nostalgia economy where old art becomes new, becomes old, becomes new again. Here's the uncomfortable question at the heart of every finale. What if it doesn't work? That the Duffers have known what the last scene would be for years. They've refined it, tested it, built 5 seasons toward it, and they still can't be sure it'll land because endings are weird. They have to provide closure while also justifying everything that came before, while also feeling emotionally earned, while also surprising you, while also being inevitable. That's too many jobs for 30 minutes of television. And yet we demand it. We treat finales like sacred texts, like the entire value of the preceding narrative hinges on whether the last beat lands correctly, which is maybe unfair. But it's also how storytelling works. The ending recontextualizes everything. The Duffers understand this. That's why they started with the ending. They knew that if they failed there, nothing else would matter. All the monster fights, all the 80s references, all the emotional beats would be retroactively diminished by a weak conclusion. 10 years is a long time to live inside someone else's imagination. Long enough that a show stops being a show and becomes a shared cultural experience, a reference point, a Halloween costume, a Spotify algorithm event. The Duffers started as underdogs with a straight-to-VOD horror movie and a dream. Their ending as the architects of a cultural phenomenon. That's a legacy. But legacy is just another word for something that's already over. And right now, Stranger Things isn't over. It's ending, present tense. The cast is crying, the creators are stressed. Linda Hamilton is doing her own stunts at 68, and somewhere in the ether, Kate Bush's mechanical birds are still chirping. Whether the finale works, whether it sticks the landing, we'll find out soon enough. The Duffers have done everything they can. Now they just have to trust it. And honestly, that might be the bravest part. Not writing the ending, but letting it go, letting it become ours instead of theirs. That's what endings are supposed to do. It's time for it to end, not because it has to, but because they chose to end it while it still matters. And when it's over, when the upside down is closed for good and the kids of Hawkins hang up their monster hunting gear one last time, the show will become something else entirely. It'll become a memory, a time capsule, a thing we can point to and say, remember when that mattered? Remember when we all cared about the same thing at the same time? Yeah, I remember.